Om Namah Shri Yatirajaya Vivekananda Suraye Satchit Sukha Swarupaya Swamine Tapaharine. My humble pranams to Swami Medhanandaji Maharaj for inviting me today, and to Mohanji for organizing this exciting event. And thank you all for attending. So when I was first approached to speak to you, I was asked to give a lecture, and I thought, who am I to lecture all the best and the brightest students in India? So I thought, you already know how to study hard, you know how to focus, you know how to concentrate, you have self-discipline. If you didn't have these things, you wouldn't be here now. So I thought, and I think you're used to listening to lectures, so I wanted to do this in a different way. I asked Maharaj whether we can make it an interactive session rather than a lecture, which means I want to hear from you. So please don't be shy. So I set the theme, the broad theme of today's session, interactive session, as follows: what is the ultimate goal of education? And the way I thought I can get the ball rolling is to present, in the course of our discussion, three of what I call Swami Vivekananda's Mahavakyas on education. Three of his great teachings on education. I'll do them one at a time. And I'll raise a few questions about each of these Mahavakyas, and I want to hear your answers. I don't want to give you the answers. Part of the problem I find with some of the educational institutions in India is that the educational system is too top-down. The teacher knows everything, the student knows nothing, and the aim of education is to stuff the brains of the students with the information that the teacher gives. And then how do you test the students' knowledge? You make them regurgitate whatever they wrote down, word for word, onto a piece of paper. I think this is not the ideal of education that Swamiji had in mind. And since this is a group of people who are part of the Vivekananda study circle, I thought that focusing on Swamiji's ideals of education is very, very important. And the other thing is I take very seriously the name of your group, Vivekananda Study Circle. It's not Vivekananda lecture Circle, it's Vivekananda Study Circle. It means I want each of us to think deeply and reflect deeply on Swami Vivekananda's teachings on education. And then you can also afterward ask questions about other things as well. It's not that these these are rigid parameters, but let's start with this topic. What is the ultimate goal of education according to Swamiji? So let me read the first of the three Mahavakyas. Vivekananda said, education is not the amount of information that is put into your brain and runs riot there, undigested all your life. The present system of education is all wrong. The mind is crammed with facts before it knows how to think. Now, I have a few questions about this statement, which I want you to think about and answer. The first is, remember the context. He made the statement in the late 19th century, in the last decade of the 19th century, in the 1890s. This was a time when the British were ruling India. And so the first question is, to what extent do you think that Swamiji's statement about education still applies today, in 2022? This is the first question. And the second question about this Mahavakya is, this last sentence, he says, the mind is crammed with facts before it knows how to think. What does Swami Vivekananda mean by knowing how to think? Clearly, his ideal of education is not stuffing the students' minds with facts, but teaching them how to think. What did he mean by how to think? Not what. The teacher's role is not to teach what to think, but to teach how to think. What did he mean by that? So these are the two questions I want you to answer. First question, is Swamiji's statement still relevant now in 2022? Second question, what does he mean when he says that education should be about teaching us how to think and not what to think? So anybody, as I said, don't be shy. There are no wrong answers, but I want to start a discussion.
I'm a teacher.
Can you tell your name first and then?
My name is faculty member in Bangalore University Department of Chemistry. I am an alumni of this. I used to stay right here. But this is still true. Swamiji mentioned we just cram all the information. I'm doing it right now as I go every day, teach my class. I go and, as you said, it's a top-down. Go to the board, say whatever I want, according to the syllabus, obviously, not what I want. And then I ask few questions. If there is a discussions, we discuss. The class sizes are big nowadays. If you go to undergraduates, it's even bigger. I teach the master students, the size is still less. But the point of that, Swamiji is trying to say that we just cramp them. It's still relevant. It's still in the same. But I have tried few things, and small things that I've tried. And the issue that I face is the students, our students are typically from a very rural background, and the first time in their whole generation, they are studying master degree. None of their parents or their cousins, sisters, all brothers study master degree. So they have a different background, whereas the students here have a different background. Although a few of them might have the same background that I came here to study. But we still do the same and make small changes. For example, I told them you mix with your classmates so that you will know who is what and how they are. Because each of us has some good things we learn. But they are not. They are sitting with the same classmates in the day one. They continue to.
I see. Okay. So the teachers are blaming the students, it looks like.
That's exactly the first thing I did.
Yeah. So no. So the thing is, that's an important point. Oh boy, this. No, then you can face them and say it. What's the point? I'm farther away from them than he is. What I understand is that, what's your name again? Vishwadit. Is that he said he was trying to, in his own small way, to implement the kind of ideal of education that Swamiji wanted, that he mentions in the Mahavakya, but that the difficulty he faced is that the students were not receptive to this radically new kind of education, that the students were more used to and more comfortable with a top-down kind of lecturing format. This is what I think you said. So that raises an important issue. This is one of the things I wanted to discuss with you today. See, you guys are now doing your undergraduate and what, masters and PhD, basically all. Mostly PhD, postgraduate. Undergraduates are fewer. Okay, so all. BSc, MSc, PhD, right? So the thing is, I think what Swamiji envisioned has to start from kindergarten, from day one of education. He's not talking just about starting at the bachelor's level. This has to start from when the mind is still plastic, when the brain is still plastic, when it's still receptive to new ideas. I grew up in the US, and I lived there for 27 years. I also lived in Oxford for 1 year as a student, in Germany for another year, and I've been living in India for 13 years now, so I can compare the different educational systems. And I can tell you firsthand that, when I went to preschool, pre-kindergarten, age 5, I think, the way they taught was, it was already not top-down. They give me, do you guys have Legos? Do you play with Legos here? Do you know what Legos are? No? Yeah, most of you know, right? You can build things with these blocks of Legos, right? So I still remember, the teacher told me, here are some Legos, build something with it. And then tell us what you built and why you built it and how you built it. So I built some kind of truck and then I explained it to the others. So from day one of the American educational system, you are taught to think for yourself, to be creative, to explain your own ideas, your own perspectives. And then slowly that idea starts germinating in that young child's, that impressionable mind. And then that system continues in kindergarten, 1st through 5th grade, then 6th through 8th grade, then in high school, which is 9th through 12th grade in the US. And then you go to college, and the mind is already prepared for that kind of educational system. I'll give you an example. When I spent 1 year at Oxford University, it was my 3rd year of undergraduate. And their system is very unique. They have what's called, only 2 universities in the world have this system, Oxford and Cambridge. It's called the tutorial system. Do any of you know about this? So the idea is that, whereas in almost all other universities in the world, the main method of instruction is lectures. At Oxford and Cambridge, they have lectures, but those lectures are university-wide, and anybody can attend those lectures, and that's not the main mode of instruction. The main mode of instruction is what are called tutorials, which are one-on-one classes. The professor and the student. And before each class, the teacher gives a huge list of books and articles that they have to read on a particular topic. So, for instance, I took a class on aesthetics. And there's a huge list of scholarly articles and books that the professor told me to read. They give you 1 week to read all that information and then to write a 10-page research paper with an original argument, not summarizing what I read in the things that I read. What is my interpretation, my understanding? Give a new theory and give justification for it. It's 10 pages, so not just your idea, but justifying your idea, justifying your interpretation. And then during the tutorial, I have to print out that 10-page paper. The whole tutorial, the format is, I read it out loud. I read my paper out loud, and the professor is listening very carefully, taking notes. And after each paragraph, he or she will ask me, why did you say this? What's your justification for this? What about this perspective? Or why didn't you take into account what scholar X or Y said? Like that. This is Oxford education. This is how I think this is what Swamiji meant. At least one part of what Swamiji meant when he said, we shouldn't teach what to think, but how to think. And there were some times when I made the mistake of summarizing a scholar's argument. Then my professor said, I didn't ask you for a summary of that person's argument. I want to know what you think, you know? This is just one example. So, this is a real problem. The problem that education doesn't start from BSc or MSc. It starts from preschool and kindergarten. So the entire educational system from age 5 needs to be overhauled, it seems to me. And focus more on critical thinking and originality and creativity. That's my feeling. But I want to hear from students now. The whole point of this is to hear from students and to get you to start thinking. So don't be shy. Yeah. Tell me your name first and then...
I'm a PhD student here. Sir, according to my thought, when Swamiji told this particular thing, I really doubt that this kind of system that you just said is there in Oxford. I really don't know if he was aware about that, but what he basically wanted to say is we should question, in my opinion. Like, even when we were a child, when we were children, some of our teachers or even our parents taught us, asked us to ask anything, okay? You should ask why you are doing or why it is like that, why it is of this color. So that kind of thing starts in our family when we are a child. But after that, when we move to a system, okay, a typical study system, academic system, what happens, there are different restrictions or constraints. So the first thing actually what happens to us that you should not question, let the faculty complete this. And most of the time when the faculty completes this, it is already 35 minutes or 45 minutes. And if everyone asks questions to the faculty, maybe it will take 2.5 hours to complete. And there is one more problem, is if everyone starts putting their thought, okay, in a 1:1 way, I really doubt if class at kindergarten, not kindergarten, maybe 5th standard class will ever be finished. Okay, so I think there is a gap between, in one way we are asked to ask questions, in another way our system doesn't allow us to ask questions because it's a point of practical limitation. So I think that is one of the problems, and I do not think that this questioning is only restricted in the education system. I do not think that Swamiji did meant the education system is only structured education system. It includes, I think the education includes even those things which are not in a college. Okay, it's about the structuring of our entire brain. In my opinion, that is very important. But I have a question to you that do you think that I just told about a problem that maybe in the childhood we're asked to, we're guided to ask questions, but after that the system is so that you cannot ask questions because of different practical constraints. Can there be a gap? Can there be a future? Or if Swamiji proposed something to fulfill the gap?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Auditra is asking, it's a practical difficulty. You raised one practical difficulty, which is you're blaming the students. And he's saying, no, the problem is not the students. The problem is, there's a practical difficulty, which is that if everybody just starts asking questions, then first of all, you won't learn the basic information that you need to move forward in your education and to actually have the know-how to construct an engine or to cure a patient or to do whatever you're expected to do. That's the first thing. And my response would be, I don't think Swamiji is saying that we should do away with lecturing altogether. I hope I'm not saying that either. I did mention that at Oxford, they do have lectures. As I said, they have university-wide lectures. But those are supplementary to the tutorial system. And in the US, where I studied for many years, the system is they have lectures for any class at the undergraduate level. Actually, I'll explain to you that I don't know how it works in India, but in the US at least, there's a difference between the way that bachelor's classes are taught and the way that PhD classes are taught. So at the undergraduate level, there are 2 or 3 lectures per week. The professor will speak, and at the end of about a 1-hour lecture, there will be 5 to 10 minutes of question and answer. I think that's more or less similar to the Indian system. Am I correct? However, each of those classes in the US also has what's called a discussion section. Do you guys have that here? Where it's run by one of the graduate student teaching assistants of that professor in that class. And so let's say that the class is about 100 people. You break them up into groups of 15 or so. So you have a bunch of different discussion sections, and that discussion section meets once a week, led by one of these graduate student, like PhD student teaching assistants. And that's where the whole point of the discussion section is, let's discuss deeply and think critically about what Professor X, Y, or Z said in those lectures. And what did you think about this, or why does he say that, or do you agree or disagree with what Professor X said? So you have both. That's one way of bridging the gap. Do you see what I'm saying?
But in my opinion, that is at a higher level.
Okay. So, kindergarten, I can't imagine anybody lecturing to kindergartners. I mean, if you want to talk about lecturing, we should start with maybe middle school and high school. I think, because up to elementary school, I mean, it's more about letting them grow, let their minds expand. I remember in 4th grade, one of the assignments was to bring home a pet crayfish. What is a crayfish in Indian languages? I don't know. It's looks like a shrimp. And keep it, you raise it like it's your child for a few days. Like these kinds of things, It's you have to think outside the box, I liked it. I liked these assignments. Make a candle made of different colors. This was 1st grade, I remember. Age 6 in Boston. These are the kinds of things. I hope that, I'm glad that I wasn't lectured at from age 5 and 6. Lectures started in middle school, when we're assigned a book to read, a certain number of pages. Then the teacher will explain what those pages are about, but then at the same time they'll be asking us questions, and then we'll be giving our input, and then they'll be giving us. So the other thing is, this is another side of the problem, I think. The Indian educational system is too focused on exams. The main method of testing our understanding is through exams, and the problem with exams are that they usually test knowledge of facts, which is exactly what Swamiji is criticizing. Education is not the amount of information that is put into your brain and runs riot there. So there are 2 possible solutions to this. One is changing the nature of the exams, the format of the exams. You can make them, instead of asking factual questions, you can ask really open-ended questions. I'll give you one example of this. At Oxford, there's a famous college called All Souls College. And they have a notoriously difficult exam where they literally just give one word: ethics, justice, gravity, something like that. And you're supposed to write a lengthy essay reflecting on that word, on the keyword. This has been an example of an exam that's kind of thinking outside the box. Do you see what I mean? So it's, even if you give exams, there's a better way of giving it. Now, that's one thing. I mentioned also that the way that classes are taught at the master's and PhD level in the US is different from the undergraduate. So let me explain that a little bit. At the graduate level, when you enroll in a master's level or PhD level course, there are no lectures. At least I'm speaking from humanities standpoint, so maybe science is actually a bit different. I'm not sure. But in humanities subjects, the way they do it is they have what are called seminars. Even they don't call them courses or lectures, they call them seminars, graduate seminars. And instead of having like a podium where the teacher speaks and the students are there in chairs, like in an auditorium, it's a round table. It's a large round table, and there are 10 to 15 chairs. And by and large, from day one, the students refer to the professor by their first name. Celeste, Mark, there's no Professor so-and-so or Swami so-and-so. That already democratizes the entire educational process. I am a co-learner along with you. We're all learning together. I'm a little bit further ahead than you, but we're all learning together. Yeah.
My name is Ayush Swamiji. I would like to counter you that all our examinations are not fact-based or written examinations. We also have Viva, we also have project assignments, we have internships by which students are evaluated. So I don't think it is very fair to say that it is only fact-based examination. I think there are different areas where students they are evaluated.
Okay, good. So I hope I didn't say that it's only fact-based education, but I think that there's too much of an emphasis. I think too many exams are fact-based. So thank you for clarifying. Yeah.
Regarding this particular statement of Swamiji.
And say your name first.
So regarding this particular statement of Swamiji, what I can
Now you speak. Here.
Okay. So Maharaj, regarding this particular statement of Swamiji, I think what he is talking about is more about the education policy or about the purpose of education. Okay? Because you are talking about the education system that you have seen in Oxford or Cambridge and what you see in India. Okay? So we have to understand here that it is the same British people who had introduced the particular education system there in Oxford and Cambridge and there here in India. But the purpose of education system that they had introduced in these two places are not the same. In Oxford and Cambridge, or in UK, or in Europe, or US, whatever these places, the education system is designed to make people more creative. Whereas in India, it has been to make people a more obedient slaves. That we have to understand. And if the purpose itself is like that, so what it cannot create, it cannot generate any new creativity in the people who are being taught. So I believe whatever Swamiji is talking in this particular statement, Mahavakya you have said, it is more about the purpose and the policy of education than the style of education.
Thank you. Yeah. It's a very nice point. He's raising the point that I mentioned that Swamiji made this statement in the 1890s when India was under British colonial rule. There's Macaulay's educational policy where the idea was to somehow indoctrinate Indians into being a humble, submissive race so that they can rule them effectively. And the idea was not to encourage them to think for themselves, right? So all that's true. But the point is, we're no longer under British rule. And it's been over 70 years since we've attained independence. And now the question is, have we made progress? Now we're autonomous, we're free. What have we done with that freedom? Have we really reformed our educational system and made it more of a man-making education like Swamiji wanted? Have we really started emphasizing, saying, forget, these Brits have ruined us, and let's now stand on our own feet, and let's teach our fellow Indians in a proper way? I want to hear the answer to that question now. Well, anybody, you can also answer anybody, but let's keep that track, and then we can keep going. What progress have we made since 1947? That's the question I'd like to.
My name is Civic and I'm doing Ph.D. here. So, what I see on this is that there are lots of information available out there.
Sorry?
Lots of information available out there. Like we are studying physics, chemistry, biology, humanities. So, but we are using the same machine. That we are using the brain to study all those things. So the basic functionality to capture this information or understand the information, process the information is same. So we should not focus on storing the information, but we should focus on how this brain works, like how the basic. If we understand how our brain works, then we can understand everything. Like we can apply this understanding to any field, and we can capture the information. Like let's say computer, so it is designed based on logic. So whatever, like we can feed it to some scientific software, and it can work. We can feed it to some animation work, and it can work. So we should not focus on, my point of view, we should not focus on information, but we should focus on understanding our mind when we are dealing with those information. So that will actually train us, like train our mind. So while studying anything, I think we should focus on like while processing that information, we should focus on how our brain is working in that moment, and that will give us more knowledge about our brain, and that knowledge, I think, will help us to solve any problem in the world.
Good, thank you. What's your name? Shibu. Thank you, Shibu. So Shibu was explaining how one way that we can improve our ability to think is by investigating the nature of the brain and how the brain works. I think that's a field of neuroscience. Is that what you're thinking of, or what exactly?
Not neuroscience,
or cognitive psychology?
We can also see also like self-reflection.
Oh, I see. You mean it more generally. Yeah. I think that's also part of what Swamiji meant. So coming back to Ayush's question, I think it's an important question. It goes back to one of the questions I raised in the beginning. Do you think that this statement made by Swamiji in the 1890s is still relevant now? Because he seems to be suggesting that somehow, since the British have left, maybe everything is hunky-dory, everything is fine now. Ayush is saying that, well, it's not true that most of our exams are rote memorization based, so then maybe there's no problem. Maybe we've solved the problem. What do you think? How do you feel? I mean, do you feel that there's something wrong with the educational system in India? Yeah. No, please come. And speak to them, yeah.
See, right now the discussion is more about the education system of Swamiji than on its implementation. Right now,
yeah.
We are heading towards such a line, or we are in such a situation discussing the thing. So, in my opinion, in IISc particularly, it has such a culture that is there in Oxford or Cambridge. May not be in the same way, but is in a similar way. We have very hard course lines, but there not only the facts, but also there are rigorous. Lot of time is given to students to think on it. Even the exams here are not at all conventional exams. There are exams where students sit for 8 or 9 hours to just fill in the blanks. Such exams are there across IISc. So, personally, from my background, everyone will agree that before coming to IISc, whatever we learned, we hardly remember anything. After coming IISc, whatever we learned, we know what we have learned. It is because of the system in IISc, and I think this is a good copy of Oxford or Cambridge, whatever be. But there is a but. As we are also discussing about its implementation, in other part of the country or in other institutions of the country, this is very difficult to implement. It is, one reason is the bulk of the student or the bulk of the country, the size of the university, number of students.
Student-faculty ratio, is that student-faculty ratio?
Student-faculty ratio, there are practical problems. Another thing which I think is more important is the motivation. I think Swamiji tried to, taught us to be self-motivated. Here what we have seen, when a faculty comes in the class, you don't want to miss a single line. Why? Because we see the faculty himself is very much motivated. We see he wants us to not only get good grades, he wants us to learn the thing.
So the teacher should be inspiring. I mean, that's part of what you're saying.
That's what Swamiji
And in
wants.
other places, they may not be as inspiring as the teachers here, like him. And
I don't say that, but that is also true. In my opinion, it should be top down, and it's the responsibility of the father to teach the son or daughter. I think Swamiji did a similar thing, but only one Swamiji
I see.
was not enough for us. That's what.
Okay, thank you very much, Aritra, right? Thank you. So you raised a number of interesting points. So one is this issue of implementation, and the other is you seem to think that this top-down approach is actually effective if it's done well, basically. Yeah. So I want to mention two things here. So first, regarding the context of this issue of implementation, let's raise this important issue. I hope all of you know that in 2020, the government issued a national educational policy. Have you read it? How many of you have actually studied that document? Almost nobody. How many have read the NEP?
I have looked at it.
You've looked at it.
In a few things.
You browsed it, but if I give you an exam on it, you may flunk the exam. Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So most of you are not aware of the content. Okay. So I read it fairly carefully because I was asked to give some lectures based on it for these FDPs, faculty development programs, several months ago. And so if you study it carefully, what you'll find is that they're basically trying to reform the Indian educational system along the lines of the best Western educational institutions. I don't see any, they don't say it, but it's very obvious. Because I grew up in the West, I can tell you that. They say that Indian universities, first of all, a very obvious example of this, right now the undergraduate education in India is 3 years, right? They're saying 4 years. That's an American educational system. That's the American undergraduate program. Number two, multidisciplinarity is one of the keynotes of the NEP. That's something that's been emphasized in the West for many, many years, for many, many decades. I'll give you an example. When I was an undergraduate, actually this explains the virtue of having 4 years rather than 3, and it explains the virtue of multidisciplinary. My father is a typical Indian father, and Bengali father, even more specifically. Tumi Bangali. So you'll understand this. So he's a mechanical engineer, my mother is a scientist, and so my father forced me to enroll in Berkeley as a computer science student. And I was fine, I was good at it. I was good at math, but I thought, what is the point in all this? Ultimately, how is that going to take me to, higher spiritual goals and all that? And so after 1 year, after studying math, computer science, economics, English, philosophy, I chose to change my major. It's called a major. Whatever your main subject is called your major in the US. I changed my major after 1 year from computer science to philosophy and English literature. And my father was furious, but that changed my life. It was transformative. And it's because I had the courage and I had the scope, because it was a 4-year program, to change my major, that I was able to do my Ph.D. in German philosophy. During my Ph.D., you have no idea, I took more classes outside of my department than inside my department. I took 4 semesters of Sanskrit, some 3 or 4 German courses, classes in history, political science, history, art history, German, all sorts of things. And they encourage it. That's called multidisciplinarity. What are some other emphases in the NEP, the National Educational Policy document? Critical thinking. Again, this is something that's very strongly emphasized in the West. Creativity, originality, all of these things are strongly emphasized. And then another thing that's very important to mention, which is not as strongly present in the West, but which is slowly coming, Indian knowledge systems. The abbreviation is IISc. Partly as a result of this colonial legacy, Indian educational systems are they tend to imitate the West. And one way of imitating the West is to copy the kind of issues and the kind of thinkers and the kind of topics and fields that the West is already studying. But what happens is, for instance, in philosophy departments, for too long, the emphasis in Indian philosophy departments is Western philosophy, and it's a shame. So part of the purpose of the NEP is to say, what about our own indigenous Indian, our great Indian philosophical systems? Why don't those systems get equal airtime? Why are they second class compared to Western philosophies? So this is a very important thrust also in the NEP. Now the question that Arita raised, this issue of implementation, this is something I was speaking to Mohan about yesterday. These are very wonderful ideals, these are lofty ideals. But are we beginning to implement those ideals? And really, we need to ask ourselves that question. As students, as teachers, as educational administrators, vice chancellors, whoever we are, at whatever level, these are big ideas. One thing Swami Vivekananda said is, in India, people have the loftiest ideals, but they're terrible at implementing the ideas. And he even said, after visiting the West, he said that practical Vedanta you'll find it more in the West than in India. You get the theory of Vedanta in India, the greatest thinkers and sages, but in terms of societal implementation, you find that in the West more. What did he mean by that? I think one example is, in India, Swamiji was very critical of the caste system. So even though we talk about the oneness of human beings, look at what we're doing. He says we're trampling the poor and the low caste under our feet. But in the West, there's, as I said, remember the graduate seminars, you call your professor by their first name. That's literally practical Vedanta. Why should I put you on a pedestal? Anyway, that's regarding implementation. The second issue was what? The one you're in?
Faculty should be motivated enough to motivate.
Yeah, so we want teachers who are inspiring. So he's reversing your, so you're blaming the students and he's blaming the teachers. And he's saying in IISc everything is great. And I don't know whether the rest of you agree. I don't know whether any of you are brave enough to point out flaws in your own educational system here. But in any case, we don't have to talk about this institution. We're talking at a more general level. Because these are very fundamental issues regarding Indian culture and society as a whole. Oh, but one thing regarding what you said about you felt that a top-down lecture system is the best kind of education as long as the lectures are suitable. One thing that I think it's important to point out is that humanities education and science education is radically different. And what I think, what you're saying, I think may apply to the science subjects, and it may not apply nearly as well to humanities subjects. That's something I feel. What is the difference? Why do I say that? Well, think about it. When in a physics course, you read a physics textbook. What does a physics textbook tell you? It tells you what is the law of gravity, what does E equal mc squared mean. These are facts, and you're learning these facts. You're learning about how nature works, the laws of nature. Am I right? Something like that? Right? So the thing is, remember that Swamiji was not a science student. He was a humanities student. He studied philosophy and English literature and other subjects at Scottish Church College in Kolkata. So he may even have been thinking about, I don't know, but he may have been thinking more about a humanities education. At that time now science has all the prestige in India. But at that time, his father was a lawyer, that was very prestigious. He studied philosophy. He also was training in law before he became a monk. I feel that, this is my opinion, I want to hear your feedback on this, and I'm speaking to a room full of science students, but I feel that Indian society is too biased towards sciences. There was a reason for it post-independence, which is that there was a vital need for scientists and engineers. I understand that. But now it's 75 years or more after independence, and the question is, why are humanities subjects systematically denigrated in Indian society? Why is it that Indian parents still feel that it's only if you do poorly on your Madhyamika exam, the 10th grade exam, that you will go into the so-called arts stream, and the best students will invariably go into the science stream? Why this kind of thinking? Because I'm interrogating this because so long as we think this way, what happens is that the worst students go into humanities subjects, they become the next generation's teachers, and it becomes a vicious cycle. And the sad thing about this is that if you go back to India's great past, the greatest thinkers, the greatest philosophers, the greatest writers, Kalidasa, Shankaracharya, Ramanuja, they were humanities people. Of course, there were scientists too, but why are we systematically neglecting the humanities subjects and putting them on a lower level? See, you're part of the Vivekananda study circle. How do you study Swamiji's complete works? Do you study it like a physics textbook? Will that get you anywhere? So now, the reason I bring this up is because coming back to your issue, you felt that maybe the top-down lecturing system is good, but that you need good, inspiring teachers. The thing is, in humanities subjects, I'll give you another example. Let's forget about Oxford now and fast forward to my Ph.D. I had a Fulbright scholarship and I spent 1 year in Berlin at Humboldt University, where I was sitting in on a class on Immanuel Kant's Critique of Pure Reason. It's one of the great philosophical masterpieces in the Western tradition. Immanuel Kant was a great German philosopher. It's a huge book. It's about 600 to 700 pages. It was a 3 or 4 month long seminar. Do you know how many pages of that book we read together? 4 or 5 pages. 4 or 5 pages in the course of 3 or 4 months. And what the teacher would do is, this is like that graduate seminar style, he would read one sentence in German from Kant's book, and then he would say, how do you interpret it? This is one interpretation, this is another interpretation, this is a third interpretation, this is a fourth interpretation, and then have discussion with the students. Which interpretation do you think is right and why? Give justification for it. Do you see? It wouldn't make sense to apply that model to a physics textbook or a math textbook. Am I correct? So again, I think we should be careful about distinguishing what subject we're talking about when we're talking about which educational model may be most appropriate for that subject. I personally feel that at least for humanities subjects, the top-down lecture model works at an early level, at an early stage. Grades 6 through 12, maybe up through high school, and to a certain extent in undergraduate subjects, as long as there's also scope for discussion. Like I said, in the US, they have a discussion section, a weekly discussion section that goes hand in hand with the lectures. But lecturing should not be the sole medium of instruction. And then, of course, I agree with you that the more inspiring that the teachers are, the more the students will be able to assimilate that information. Okay, so that's the first Mahavakya. I wanted to now read the second. Swamiji says, we must have life-building, man-making, character-making assimilation of ideas. If you have assimilated 5 ideas and made them your life and character, you have more education than any man who has got by heart a whole library. It's another famous statement of Swamiji's. Second Mahavakya. I have a few questions, but one question is, some of these statements he's making are no longer politically correct. He's using statements like man-making and you have more education than any man who has got by heart a whole library. Obviously, he doesn't mean to exclude women. He was one of the foremost champions of women's education. That's not what he meant, but at that time in the 1890s, that was the conventional language used. But the first question is, what did he mean by a man-making education? What do you think he meant by that? Ability to face challenges. Yeah, that's good. So what does he mean by man there? I mean, that would be a more direct way of asking. Man-making means education should make men. He doesn't mean purushas, like, male gendered people. What does he mean? He means some character traits. So one of these character traits would be the ability, the strength, and the courage to face whatever challenges come in your way. I think that's good. Yeah, exactly. So these are character traits that he wanted the educational system to inculcate in us. One of them is the ability to face challenges. What other character traits? Huh? Yeah, that's good. I'm glad that you mentioned physical strength and mental strength. Because another thing, and this again coming from different countries, and I find that in the West, starting from an early age, they strongly emphasize physical education. It's a very important part of the educational system. I hope that recently things are changing in India, but by and large I find that it's a kind of, because it's mandatory, they just add some kind of useless thing where you jump up and down for 2 minutes and nobody's the wiser for it. But that's a very important part of what I think Swamiji meant by a man-making education. It has to work at the level of Annamaya, Pranamaya, and Manomaya all at once. The physical level, the level of emotions and feeling, and at the level of intellect and mind. And I think that's underemphasized here. Just ask yourself, there are over 1 billion people in India. Why is it that we can't produce more gold medalists in the Olympics? And why tiny countries like Japan, South Korea, for goodness sakes, are far outstripping India? in physical fitness. I don't want to hear excuses. I've seen it because I'm in a monastic order where most monks are they're too lethargic. And Swamiji, in fact, he said that in a monastic rule book, he says every single day, every monk should exercise twice a day, not once a day, but twice a day. So that's about monks, but more generally, I feel that there are things that we can learn from Western culture. One of these things is health consciousness. And at the level of mind, that's also very, very true. So thank you very much. Anyone else? What are other character traits of a man making education? Yeah, you first and then you, right? Somebody spoke from here as well. Yeah, okay, you go first and then I'll go to her. Go ahead. What's her and okay, she anyway, let her sit and then just say your name and then I'll repeat it. How about that? I can't hear you. Oh, this is the problem.
Humanity should be like after education, like if you educate yourself, the humanity should be within yourself. Like it should not get into your mind. You should have some humanity alive in yourself. Even like after getting educated, it should not get into your mind. That is what
Humanity. What do you mean by humanity?
humanity having the same kind feeling for everyone, like treating everyone equally, not just like judging anyone on the basis of what one possesses. That's what I interpret from humanity.
Okay, I have a little bit trouble understanding what you mean. Can somebody else help explain? Sorry? Oh, I see. Okay. That's helpful. I see. Feeling for humanity. Yeah, so another character trait that may be important in what Swamiji meant by a man making education, making people real human beings, right? If we avoid the politically incorrect language. Sri Ramakrishna in Bangla, he had this, he was a great wordsmith. And so he said, Manush na manhush. Manush in Bangla means a human being. And hush in Bangla means having consciousness, but what he meant is spiritual consciousness. So he's saying being a true human being means having a kind of ethical and spiritual consciousness, and I think that's what you meant, is that you should have fellow feeling, you should feel for others. That's a fundamental part of a true ideal education. Thank you.
Human with the E at the end.
Sorry?
Human with the E at the end.
Well, humane. Oh, that's nice. Yeah, good. He's also a wordsmith. So. Human or humane? Yeah, thank you. Yes, please, go ahead. What's your name? Isha.
One's own self-interest and taking into account all kinds of factors and then reach a good resolution with the best possible.
That's a really excellent point. Yeah, you're saying that one aspect of a humanity making education, an education that makes us good human beings, is that we should be able to learn to think as objectively as possible. And this is actually linked to what you were saying, because you can do that only by being able to inhabit other people's standpoints. If you're stuck in your own small, narrow standpoint, then you're not going to be able to understand or sympathize with other people. One thing in that regard, I wanted to read something else Swamiji said. It's a very interesting statement. This is not directly related to education, but I think it's indirectly very relevant to his views on education. He wrote this in an 1895 letter to his brother disciple, Swami Ramakrishna-Vivekananda, Shashi Maharaj. Swami Vivekananda said, had I the money, I would send each one of you to travel all over the world. No great idea can have a place in the heart unless one steps out of his little corner. It's a very profound statement. Why do I think this has implications for education? Well, because in the West, at least, students are encouraged to study abroad. I was encouraged. As soon as I joined at Berkeley as an undergraduate, I had this idea in my head, and my teachers encouraged me. One of my teachers studied at Oxford, he did his master's there, and he said, you would thrive there, you should go there. And he helped me, he wrote a letter of recommendation. And I had the opportunity to spend 1 year at Oxford during my undergraduate, and it was really a transformative experience for me. I did the same thing. I was doing my PhD at Berkeley, and I got a Fulbright scholarship, and I spent an entire year doing doctoral research in Germany, where I was studying German medium classes. I interacted with professors coming from a completely different standpoint. Their research methodology is different from their American counterparts, and the way that students, interact with everything was different. And I really grew, being exposed to different culture, not just the educational systems, but living in different countries. It really expands the mind. I gave a lecture a few days ago for the UK Center on the occasion of the foundation day of the Ramakrishna Mission, 1st May, 1897. And I mentioned that our previous General Secretary of the Ramakrishna Math and Mission, his name is Swami Medhanandaji. He's now a Vice President of our order. In his capacity as General Secretary, he traveled to some of our centers in different countries. He traveled to our center in Japan, and he did some sightseeing. He visited places in Japan. He visited the US and other places. Then he came back to India, and we went for a walk. This was a few years ago. And he very excitedly told me about his impressions of these different countries. And he said, Indians can learn so much from other countries. And he gave specific examples, which I really liked. He said, when I went to Japan, I was walking on a street, and across the street I saw a very, very elderly woman, maybe late 80s, early 90s. She could barely walk, walking with a cane. And she spotted a small piece of litter, L-I-T-T-E-R, a small piece of trash on the ground, a bit far away from her. She took great pains to slowly walk over, bend over, pick up that piece of trash, walk over to the dustbin and throw it away. And Sweetanandaji said, Indians have a great deal to learn from this. We don't have a civic sense in India. We don't care about the cleanliness of our country, looking after other people, hygiene. This is one thing. That he said, we have a lot to learn from Japanese culture in this way.
Why is that? Can we justify this on any basis?
Justify what?
That we don't have a sense of.
Oh, I see. Yeah, that's a good question. Maybe things have changed also. Swachh Bharat has started. Yeah, I mean, that's an open question. You can also answer it. Do you feel that everything is fine? I mean, I lived in Bilumad for 11 years, and I see trash all over the place. That's been my experience. Mysore is much better. I've lived in Mysore, and it's much cleaner. It depends on the place, I think. That also, where you are in India, there are many things, I think. So that's one thing. Another example he gave, he went to the US, and one thing he found is that people are much more self-reliant in India. In general, these are generalizations, and it doesn't apply to everybody, but that's not, he's making some general observations. What he found is that in the US, people cook for themselves, people clean their own houses and bathrooms, people drive themselves to work. They don't have drivers because it's too expensive. Only celebrities have drivers and cooks, servants, and these things. And he says that's something we can also learn from, this self-reliance from Western countries. That's another example. Anyway, and then another example is health consciousness, something I already mentioned. So Swamiji, I think one thing he meant is, by exposing ourselves to other countries, living in other countries, meeting people from other countries, what Swamiji, one thing he said, this is not something I have here, but so I can't give you the exact quotation. He said that every country has a certain ideal. And the ideal person is the person who can assimilate all of the ideals of the different countries and combine them in his or her own person. This is also an aspect of man-making education, it seems to me. The idea is, and then he gave some examples. He said the ideal of India is chastity. The ideal of the West is truth. And again, we can ask, why is there so much corruption in India? Why is there not such a commitment to truthfulness? These are questions. And you might say, wait a minute, no, there's no corruption, or there's as much corruption in the West as in India. I would disagree, but we can have discussions about that. But again, I think Swamiji's idea, after he traveled to other countries, he said, look, these are things that India should learn. How can we be more truthful? How can we reduce the level of corruption at all levels of society? And India has its own great ideals, spiritual ideals, the ideal of brahmacharya, ideals of spiritual, realization, all these things, which the West must learn from us. So it's not one-sided. He said everybody should learn from each other, right? Anyway, so somebody had their hand up here. Yeah, please. What's your name? Arun. Yeah, that's a nice point. You're saying that, Arun is suggesting that maybe one important aspect of what Swamiji meant by man-making education is realizing our spiritual nature, our oneness with everyone. Maybe, I mean, my concern about that is, this is supposed to be a secular country, and there's a real danger of, if you try to force Advaita Vedanta down everyone's throats, including Muslim students and Christian students and people who don't accept, even there are many Hindus who don't accept Advaita Vedanta. There are Vaishnavas and Shaktas and a lot of people. Advaita Vedanta is one kind. You can say that Swamiji's Advaita is a broader kind of Advaita. It's not the same as. These get very complicated, these issues. But the question again comes back to Aditya's issue of implementation. The moment you say that the ideal of education is to realize our divine oneness, immediately people are going to say, wait a minute, that's one particular sectarian understanding of the goal of life. How can we foist that on everybody in this country? So that's a danger, I think. We have to be a little bit careful about that. That's why, in this context, what's interesting is Swamiji there are two Mahavakyas in two different contexts. One context was when he's talking about spirituality and religion. His great Mahavakya was, religion is the manifestation of the divinity in all of us, right? But he defined education differently. Education is the manifestation of the perfection already in man. Swamiji was aware of, I think, this difficulty, that you cannot force everybody to swallow Advaita Vedanta. So he didn't say education is the manifestation of the divinity already in man. He said it's the manifestation of the perfection already in man. Because then you can start, if you ask, well, what is perfection? You can explain it in a non-sectarian way. Whatever perfection means in your spiritual tradition, in your religious tradition. For Christians, that may mean one thing. It may mean realizing Christ and communing in a Christian heaven with Christ. For a Muslim, it's being in heaven with Allah. Perfection means different things based on their holy books. So I think one thing we should be careful about in trying to articulate the ideals of education is making sure they're not too narrow. I think you also had a point, then we can go behind. Go ahead. Remind me of your name again? Manish, thank you, yeah. Oh, okay, we'll come back to you if you want. Yeah.
This can be relevant to all of the topics, not related to specific Mahavakya. One thing is that you mentioned that you took more courses of other fields, other domains than what you were working.
As a master's student, yeah.
So that needs a basic amount of courage. That has to be inculcated during the education process until masters.
Much earlier, yeah.
So regarding this, the question is that if we consider the situation in India, people might not get same background as we privileged students are getting. Many of them are farmers, laborers, and most of them don't even have monetary privileges. So the question is, how can a parent ensure that his child is getting closer to what Vivekananda means by education? So that can be one of the questions, and that is one of the questions that I have. Other question, what I personally feel is, say if I am a student who is, say, very much, I'm very much familiar with mugging up things, not thinking creatively maybe, not critical thinking, and now I'm here in IISc. So what could be some mental traits or mental habits that I can develop within myself, so that right now at this point and at this age of say 25-26, I can still be able to get habitual to critical thinking.
Yeah, okay, these are two very different questions. So your first question was, see, the thing is, I'm speaking to a very privileged group of students here. And the issue is there's so many people who are in dire poverty in villages and other places in India. What about them? How can they possibly get a world-class education? That's a very serious question. It's one that Swamiji was losing sleep over. And that's why he so strongly emphasized the need for the upliftment of the masses in India. That's why the Ramakrishna Mission in India is so strongly focused on social service, relief work, helping the poor. I was at Vivekananda University for 11 years in Bellumat, where our Sanskrit program 98% of the students come from extremely humble backgrounds. And we interview the parents of each one of the students who's admitted on merit alone, based on an exam. And then we ask the parents for a proof of their financial status. And if they can't afford the education, we make it free completely. And I think there are many other institutions that, if not making it completely free, they give significant discounts for students. So that's an important part of Vivekananda's mission, which the Ramakrishna Mission is beginning and trying to implement in their own humble way. So you're absolutely right. In fact, Khali pete dharma hoy na is something Sri Ramakrishna said, and Vivekananda said, Khali pete education hoy na, shikkha hoy na. That means you cannot have religion on an empty stomach, you cannot also have education on an empty stomach. You have to feed them first. So these things have to go hand in hand. And you have to work at a grassroots level. Thank you. Behind, yeah. Your name first? Shayon. Can you remove the mask just briefly so that I can hear you? Yeah. Yeah.
Spiritual oneness doesn't mean that everyone should come under the same governments. Otherwise, should be attracted to all people. In my opinion, spiritual oneness means that I think that I have the right to be happy. I also think that he also has the right to be happy. Happiness means that evolution, happiness means music, happiness means something else. That should be applied equally to everyone. And I should see also the other person being happy.
Yeah, that's a nice. You're giving a kind of secular interpretation of what it means to see the oneness in all beings. But the question is, why call that a spiritual oneness? Because, for instance, the US Constitution, the first line, each one of us is entitled to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But they're not explaining that as a spiritual principle. They're explaining it as just its basic ethics. It's a kind of ethics enshrined in the US Constitution. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm saying these are open questions. Whether that's best defined as a spiritual oneness or an ethical oneness is an open question, I think. And regarding your second question, what was your second question? What
could be some latent traits that we can now habitualize?
Oh, I see. Yeah, to kind of cultivate, to help you cultivate critical thinking, basically, right? As I said, one thing that's very, very helpful is getting out of your comfort zone. Getting out of your comfort zone. It means expose yourself to other perspectives, other ways of learning the same material, meet other people, discuss with other people the same topics you're studying, but hear different perspectives. And as I said, one of the best ways to do that is by studying abroad. Because each educational system in each country has, a different system. And you meet a different set of students, different kind of teacher, different kind of teaching method. So this is a question for you. I mean, how much do institutions in India encourage studying abroad at the undergraduate level and at the graduate level? Can anyone answer that question?
In the university level, I can say, I came from an institute, not a university. I can tell you very well, very few universities, we have some 1,000 universities. You may not find more than 10 will have the possibility of sending students, possibility in terms of fellowships.
Right.
Whereas places like the Central Institute, like Indian Institute of Science, IISc, they have some provisions by which they put. And there are some fellowships from the central governments which also allows few students to take. But if you look at the entire scenario, keep on talking university because 90% of the student resides there. 10% of the students are in the institutes.
Yeah, right.
So in terms of also division of the resources, are also not equal because of obvious reasons, so many technicals and also also the way resources are divided.
Right. There's an inherent unfairness in the way that resources are divided.
The inequality exists in every level.
Yeah.
But the whole point is the masses cannot be uplifted unless you put resources to the place it needs.
You have to put money and resources behind the masses. Yeah, I think that's
where
right.
It needs more.
Yeah. So how do we do that? How do we move in that direction?
I don't know the answer for the
This is the big $1 million question. These are great ideas, the NEP and all these things, but how do we implement these things?
For example, the NEP came after 30 years, the previous education policy. And people keep on saying this is a game changer, this is transformative.
Okay, you're a teacher at this school. To what extent has IISc Bengaluru in the past 2 years attempted to begin to implement the NEP program?
They already started.
Oh, good. So in what ways?
I think they were the first one initially to start BSNS program.
But is it a 4-year bachelor's yet?
They have started 4 years.
Oh.
Not in here yet.
Not here
They
yet.
have started
Huh.
5 years DSMS program.
That's a separate thing, but I mean the undergraduate 4-year program.
MSc they have started recently, which was not there.
Okay, so they're making progress.
Yeah, they have to do because of the way it is coming.
It's an elite institution, and they have a large share of the resources, so they're kind of at the forefront, right? I mean, they're the leaders.
In our institutes, we started 4 years undergraduate in the same.
What's your institute?
Bangalore University.
I see. Okay.
They have started 4 years, but
Okay.
the intake is very less.
Right. So let me ask another question. So in the NEP, they have this strong emphasis on multidisciplinarity. In the US, they have what's called a double major. You can get bachelor's degrees in 2 different subjects. Has that been implemented yet here or elsewhere in India?
Yeah, most of the BSc, there are triple majors. Like say, for example, my daughter is doing maths, physics, electronics. So you have
Math?
Maths, physics, electronics.
And do they have equal weight?
Yes.
She's getting different bachelor's degrees in each of these subjects.
Yeah. So it's basically.
It's a triple major,
Most
basically.
of the courses are triple majors. Like you have economics, maths, statistics, right?
Oh, I see. But but are you getting a degree in all? I mean, you're not getting separate degrees in those.
It's a BSc triple major in all these things. So they can proceed further in any of these 3 streams.
I see. Okay.
So the only older days used to have this honors program.
Yeah. Correct. Oh, so that's already, they moved away from that.
Very few honors programs are there. Now almost
That's good.
everywhere it is. It is triple majors, double majors.
Oh, really? Oh, good. Okay, good. And how much are you encouraged to take classes outside of your department, for instance? That's also, is that only in IISc or is that throughout?
So the primary constraint is the timings of the classes.
Oh, they conflict sometimes.
They're all the same. So you have to
I
do
see.
that in the morning or the evening.
I see.
You have to do it in the university.
So this again is a practical problem of implementation.
BSc my daughter's class, like they have a minimum number of disciplinary credits you have to take outside your department and outside of your majors. So they have those kind of criteria.
Right. Okay.
And coming to your 4-year bachelor's, actually engineering has been always 4 years.
4 years.
It's only the BSc, BA,
Which are
BCom,
not,
they have 3 year bachelor's.
3 years.
And the NEP is basically asking them also
To go into the 4-year program.
And in Europe, what they do is they kind of give a gap year in between. So they have a 3-year BSc with a gap year in between where they can have some industry experience.
Right.
So that they can make it as a 4-year bachelor. So that for higher education they can go to US. So it's a prerequisite. The bachelor has to be 4 years.
Right. Yeah. Name?
I'm Venkat. So I have one point to make is like the second Mahavajra Swamiji, man making a character. So Maharaj, when we talk about the character building, at that time when Swamiji was there in 19th century, 1890s, when he made that statement, there was a very profound background in it. Like we have seen the Western women educate, the education among them and
Yeah.
At that time, women were married at age and getting pregnant at 15, 16, and at that time they were educated and given respect. So, and now that statement is still relevant because in current circumstances we have changed a lot after our independence. In this 70 years of span, I don't guess like in the what the Western could have done in the improvements in 70 years, which India has progressed. So here now the system has seen women education, marriage system has everything has changed. So now coming to the character point, if we have seen the statistics where underage children, underage person, underage woman getting pregnant in US is more than India. The woman at 15, 16 getting pregnant because of she is going to school. Now in India, woman is not getting pregnant because she is going to school.
Well, in the US, they'll just abort the baby because there are much more lenient abortion laws. So then they'll abort the baby and then they'll continue with their education. So, that often happens, but I'm not supporting it. I'm just saying there are very different abortion laws in India than in the US.
So the culture being is different, but the main character is lies there. But because the education which we are getting, and it is not that directly implementing or directly imposing them to be well. But what we are seeing is the change which we have seen through the education, where they are talking about equality. And now if we see our Western counterparts, they are not getting married and getting pregnant. They are into something. So this is the change we have seen. We have improved a lot, and still there is an improvement in this. Character reading of the
Okay. So there's still, we've made a lot of progress since independence, but we have a long way to go. Is that your main point with regard to women's education?
Women's education. And one thing is that we have seen how the world wars are and everything. What Swami has given one is triple S, like head to think, heart to feel, and to work. Even if our education is sticking to only this modern science, we will be leading into these things. So, where education, what is the man making
Otherwise, you can use science to create atom bombs to destroy millions of people, right? I mean, that's the danger.
The character building is what we
I think that's right. I think that's absolutely right. I wanted to raise one more issue before we adjourn. It's an important issue, and I want your input. I don't want to do top-down lecturing about it. I want your input on this. It's a fact which I'm stating, and then I want to know your explanation for why and how we can solve the problem. Brain drain. The issue of brain drain in India. Why is it that so many of the best and brightest in India go abroad and never come back? Go abroad to do their PhDs or to start working, and then they settle down there and they don't come back. This is a question. It's a serious question. I see. Politics is there's more politics and less of a meritocracy. That's what you're saying. Don't shoot the messenger, because that's what she's saying, not me. You might think because I grew up in the West I have biases, but she's saying it. I'm just repeating it. Anyone else? Does anyone want to disagree with her? Okay, you first and then you, because I think you haven't spoken yet. So go ahead.
So many people are going to US and not coming back.
Yeah.
There are many people who are in US coming back here to join as a monk. So
well, there aren't many people. There's me.
isn't that a great thing? Like,
of course, it's a great thing.
it's just that they have set their goal to be like enjoy the material world.
Who are the they?
The people who are staying there in the US world.
Is that fair? I mean, do you really? What he's saying is the Indians who leave this country for better opportunities and to get better jobs or to get a higher education are being selfish and they're materialistic. I think that's your. Do you agree or disagree with that?
Selfish and materialistic, I don't know. Selfish is there are no.
I'm just saying that like they have set up a different goal for their life. Just that.
Okay. Have you ever lived outside of India?
I just gone to Germany for a week.
Okay. So I mean, one question is whether you're really qualified to talk about the ideals of other countries having not lived there for extended periods of time. But sorry?
Stay there for 2 or 3 years. You can easily buy a house here, which is very difficult if you are working here and you buy a house. But money is a very big factor that why people are moving abroad and they don't get settled there to make money.
And also,
I didn't follow. Sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
You said materialistic. I am saying one of the purpose is to make money.
Yeah, but does everybody leave India to make money? I don't find that plausible. A lot of people go to do their PhDs because the PhD institutions are far better than the Indian ones. I mean, I know somebody, a monk named Ayon Maharaj. He did his master's in math in IIT Kanpur, and then he went to the US to do his PhD in mathematics at Berkeley, and now he's a world famous mathematician. But he credits having gone to Berkeley. He said I couldn't have done that if I had stayed and done my PhD at IIT Kanpur. That's just one example, but there are many. I can multiply examples.
so I'm saying let's say he has.
But he's one of the least materialistic people I've ever met. He's a monk in our order. He has no interest in Kanchan, in making money at all. He's one of the least materialistic people I've met. He went to get the best education possible. Surely some people go for that reason.
From the discussion, I summarize like this: like we are just emphasizing the American education system. But
No, I hope I've also mentioned Oxford and Germany as well. So it's not just
This emphasis on like India is producing so many monks.
We're not producing that many monks. We're producing a good number, but
Isn't that like
of course
we should be
we should be proud. Yeah, of course, we should be proud. And as Swamiji said, the ideal of India is a spiritual ideal. It's the only country in the world that's ideal as a spiritual one. Why did I come here in the first place? I came here to be a monk, not to work at a university. I came here to be a monk. It's the best place in the world for spiritual life. There's no doubt.
For me, man, looking like be free, like before doing anything, like just be free first.
Okay, but I think we're moving away from the main question, which was why brain drain? And I think we should be cautious about dismissing everybody who leaves India as being materialistic. Yeah, so, okay, let's get his opinion first, then we can go to Aritra. Yeah. Name first, yeah. Yeah, Nicholas. You said you're a faculty member now, or you're PhD? Okay.
Probably two reasons. One could be the market forces. So, it's more like it basically stems from the idea of whatever you study.
Yeah.
It's like India has inculcated a few essences of the Western thought of actually saying that it's about introspection only. What you want to do, your interests should be fueled by what you would like to do, and you study them. And you end up studying it, and you see that probably there is no relevance of that study in India sometimes. I'm not saying always. But sometimes all it is that you have studied something, and that whatever study or your field of expertise is at a very, very nascent stage in India that it
I see, okay, yeah, right, okay. Okay, that's a great point. So you're saying that infrastructurally and at the level of resources, because India is a newly independent country, they don't have the money, they don't have the resources for some of the cutting edge fields that are maybe more developed in Western institutions. That could be another reason. Thank you. I wanted to raise another issue because I've interacted with a lot of students in India. A number of students have come to me specifically to help them to apply to PhD programs abroad. And one of the things they tell me again and again is something along the lines of what you said. What's your name again? Isha. What Isha said. And these are people at some of the best institutions, IIT Kanpur and other places. What they tell me is that because they're exceptional, the other students and faculty members don't encourage them at all. They try to drag them down. This is their experience. And I'm asking you, I don't want to make, but a lot of people have told me this. They got frustrated with the academic environment because they felt that anybody who's exceptional is being pulled down. And one thing I wanted to link this to with regard to Swamiji is, again, in the 1890s, Swamiji castigated Indians for one main vice, the vice of jealousy. He said it again and again. He said the ruin of this race is its jealousy. And he said that anybody who's trying to rise, everybody else will try to pull them down. And now another question I have is, he said that in the 1890s, to what extent is that still relevant now? And does that play some role in explaining why at least some people believe, like Isha and a number of other people feel that politics plays an outsized role in academics, and that meritocracy is somehow, it plays a second role rather than the primary role? Anybody?
It's not even, I think the context in which she was talking about the politics was in a corporate world, I guess, where we want to...
Is that true? I can't hear you.
Industrial research.
I see. Okay, not academia. Not academia. So what I'm saying is the other people who came to me are in academia. So the same point goes with academia. As far as these students go, who are now starting their PhDs or have started or are about to start their PhD at world-class institutions in the US, Canada, one in Poland. But to what extent is that true? That's the question. Yeah, go ahead. Okay. Well, it's up to you guys. I mean, I'm fine. But so we've now reached 12:30, and we can continue for 5 more minutes. Or does anybody else have any final questions or statements before we conclude the session? Oh, I don't have anything. Again, top down is not my cup of tea. So unless you have something to say, we can conclude here. Yeah, go ahead.
Our national institute, I come from IIT Kanpur, and other IITs read the background at the time when it got established. They were mimicked by the US universities. Like
they were mimicking the US institute. Yeah.
Got guidance from MIT.
Yeah, right.
Kharagpur, Madras, each institute got some guidance. Some professors came down to really establish.
Yeah.
So they are mimicking the
Yeah.
Western education.
Yeah.
But the problem is they are not mimicking properly.
Yeah.
this system has been corrupted in that manner, then that is the reason that
Yeah.
people are feeling that the open-mindedness and the obedience thing here is not. So that's the reason.
Yeah, I mean, look, I agree with you. My impression after having lived in India for 11 years and being in different academic institutions is that my feeling is that the best Indian universities and institutes are exceptionally good up to the master's level, but that at the PhD level, it gets dicier. I mean, it's not, some of them are really good, but are they really do they really stack up with the best top 20 universities in the world? That's the issue, and especially IITs, they're very good. Ayon Maharaj, who is a product of IIT Kanpur, he said, I couldn't have gotten a world-class, wouldn't be able to do world-class research at IIT Kanpur in mathematics. For that, I had to go abroad, because PhD is a different ballgame. It's not about top-down lecturing and this and that, but creativity, originality, publishing papers in cutting-edge journals, and again, the point raised by this gentleman about resources and infrastructure. At some level, it's also about just we don't have enough money. I mean, American universities have multi-million-dollar budgets for libraries, for labs, and all these things, right? So there are practical difficulties as well. Anybody else for one last comment? Yeah, go ahead. Your name. Sriram.
I just finished my 10th grade.
10th grade?
That's why I was homeschooled from 2nd grade.
Okay.
So I don't remember school at all. So I was homeschooled from 2nd grade. So
Okay.
what's your suggestion for undergraduate programs
You're a science student?
Yeah, I want to study.
Get into the best science program in India. Get into the best science program as you can in India. I never encourage people to do undergraduate outside. I encourage people to do their PhD programs outside, because I really think that they don't stack up. The Indian, in general, there are some exceptions, TIFR maybe, depending on who you have. Relatively, there's less politics and far more rigor in Western. At the best, I mean, of course, there's a huge range of quality of Western PhD programs, but if you go to one of the best ones, you're guaranteed to get a fantastic education at the PhD level. It's my impression. And the people whom I've helped to go abroad all uniformly say the same thing. The sad thing is many of them are going to settle outside, whether it's sad or not, but it's unfortunate. That's the brain drain issue that I wanted to ask about. But they don't feel like they want to come back, and the reason is because they know that what they tell me is that, again, they're going to fall into this the environment of jealousy and politics, and because now they have a foreign PhD stamp, many people who have Indian PhDs will be jealous of them, doubly jealous. And so these are practical problems, which in humanities it's much worse. I'm in humanities, so that's why I'm saying it. I don't know to what extent it's true in the sciences, but yeah.
You spoke about jealousy.
Yeah.
This problem is there. So how to deal with this kind of problem? We face this kind of issue where people are jealous, they want to pull us down. So sometimes people are hiding.
Yeah. Well, Swamiji traced this jealousy trait in Indians to what he called a slave mentality. So remember, his context was British colonial rule. We got independence in 1947. And so one argument is that this jealousy, which persists at all levels of Indian society, in academia, in industry, is a hangover from this slave mentality, which has been with us for so many centuries. That's one argument. Or maybe that's one factor, one aspect of the issue.
How to deal with when we see this in society, when they are working.
Don't behave like a slave. I mean, right? I mean, if you're saying that's a characteristic of a slave mentality, don't behave like slaves. Behave like, what Swami literally means is being master of yourself. But you don't have to be a sannyasi to be a master of yourself. I think what Swamiji meant by man-making education is this. A true human being is somebody who can stand on their own feet. And they should be happy if their peer did better than them on the exam, or has invented something which they couldn't have dreamed of. We should encourage them rather than trying to pull them down. That's the attitude of somebody who has self-confidence and dignity. What we need are these traits: self-confidence, dignity. There's too much. What I find is, because I've interacted with a lot of people from all inferiority complex, insecurity, these things. These are all symptoms of a slave mentality. We need self-confidence. Oh, you mean if you're the victim of jealousy, is that what you're asking? Yeah, strength, dignity. And if you're spiritual, you can pray. There's so many ways of dealing with it. But the main thing is, if I feel this is a general policy I've tried to adopt throughout my life. If somebody criticizes me for something, there are two ways I can go. First of all, let me listen carefully to what that person is saying. And one way is, if there's some truth in what that person is saying, let me be honest, let me be humble enough to try to acknowledge my weakness and try to do better in the future. That's one way. The other is, if what that person is saying is completely false, why should I even be bothered? The problem comes in when it's not just a matter of name calling or criticism, but where they actively try to sabotage you. This also happens. I know this. I mean, nobody can teach me otherwise because I've seen this in my own case. People will actively try to pull you down and harm your career because of jealousy and because of politics, because they don't like you for personal reasons. So it has real world consequences. You may lose your job. You may not get the promotion that's due to you. How do you deal with it? You have to have that dignity to fight. You shouldn't just take it sitting down. You have to fight the inequities and the unfairness built into the system. I think that's the only way. Yeah. Yeah.
In my opinion, when a student goes abroad, he mainly goes for education, keeping that this education will gain him more money after getting the education. But from my personal experience, abroad it gives a different sense of thought or different sense of peace. I know I am away from my home. When I am abroad, I was there.
Where were you?
I was in France.
Okay.
For a year.
Yeah.
Every time I knew that I am not with my family. I am away from my wife. So everything used to hurt me a lot.
Right.
In spite of that, I felt a different sense of calmness that I never felt, even being in the best institute, the best department of this country. And that is not only from the point of view of how the faculty.
Correct.
In my opinion, what I felt is very simple. There, when I used to walk through a road of 2 kilometers, if I meet two people, I greet both of them good morning, even I don't know them. Here, if I start doing the same, maybe all the days I'll spend greeting each other. Okay, so I think there my thinking is very less inspired or affected by the thought of the other people.
I see. People are more independent and they don't care as much about what other people or what.
Here, I don't know, but my feeling is that whatever I think that this is what I have thought. But here, whatever I think, I know this is not my thinking. A lot of different people are giving inputs, technically, non-technically, from different point of view. So the peace of mind I experienced there, I never have experienced.
I see. That's an interesting point. You felt that you studied abroad in France and you felt a peace of mind there that you didn't feel here. I wonder whether maybe one aspect of this is that I found this. I grew up in the US. At age 18, 17 really, I left my parents in Boston and I flew 3,000 miles across the country and I was alone in Berkeley in California. And then I was on my own. I had to fend for myself. And you grow that way. And here I think I've seen people who live with their parents up to the age of 30. Whether that's healthy or not is an open question. Again, I don't want to judge these things. I want to know from you. But I think one aspect maybe of this calmness that you're talking about is that you felt like it was like a breath of fresh air or some feeling of freedom or independence, that you were you felt like you were under the shadow of your family and the societal expectations for so long. And then suddenly when you came to France, maybe you felt this kind of freedom to be. You like the chaos. Or you don't like peace of mind. In the chaos. Okay, so the best of both worlds. That's exactly what Swamiji wanted. He said each one of us should try to assimilate the ideals of all the different countries. So that's what he's trying to do in a very practical way. So that's very good. Aditya is taking the peace of mind from France and the chaos of India and discovering peace amidst the chaos. This is Vedanta also. Very good. Thank you so much. This has been a really enlightening and enjoyable discussion. Let's end it. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Tat Sat. Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.